as Melissa said, I've been doing this for quite some time, involved with the legal community for over 20 years, and partnered with GLA, ALA for 10, 15 years on and off through that time. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. I guess maybe it's exciting stuff, maybe it's not exciting stuff, but we'll touch on some components of what's happening and what this means. Uh, we go by STS internally for short because Strategic Technology Solutions is a mouthful. But essentially, what we do is partner with law firms to really act as a guide or as a resource to help them identify their current state, lock arms with them to build a roadmap from a technology perspective that aligns to really their overall business and firm goals. So really want to just say thank you for all those in attendance. And again, Melissa, you and the team and the board at GLA, ALA for the opportunity. So I like to try to keep these as interactive as possible. I know this is over lunch, and fortunately, you probably haven't eaten lunch, so I apologize for that, but at least you're not going to be falling asleep, but maybe you will. So I'm going to do my best to try to keep this interactive and invite you to ask questions. You could throw something in the chat. We will leave some time at the end for Q&A, but if something surfaces and you want to get it out, please let me know. So with that in mind, the one question I'll start with is, do any of you know if you're on Windows 11 and have made this jump yet? I don't see.
We just got they just started issuing a lot of different started issuing laptops to everyone, and the new laptops are with Windows 11.
Okay, so you've kind of started the process. Okay, so um, so I'll take it with the silence that there's a number of folks that are still on Windows 10. So this will be good. This will be good. I see some, Helen, thank you for the head shaking. I see some, this will be good from an educational standpoint and just some guidance as things to consider, things to look out for, and things to plan. So I tried to switch my slide. Oh, there we go. Let me know if you see that next slide. Perfect. So what we'll be talking about really today is, what does this change mean? What does it entail? What's going to happen on October 14th? Maybe not. It's a little like Y2K, as far as the anxiety and buildup and, oh my God, what's going to happen? But it's going to be like Y2K too. Like nothing's really truly going to impact you initially. What's the risk? What's the risk involved with firms and organizations staying on the Windows 10 operating system? Also, what are some of the considerations we all need to collectively think about as we approach possibly moving to Windows 11 or that next opportunity or that next alternative? Uh, Other things to consider with respect to compliance from your cyber insurance, from your client's responsibilities or expectations. There are some opportunities for firms that may not meet this deadline on October 14th to protect themselves, at least for a short period of time until they make that transition. What are your unique risks, as I mentioned, as far as law firms and how to potentially identify some of those areas? And what are the alternatives? What could you do for your next step and how to get help? Just a couple topics to cover. We'll dig into them. We tried to keep this not into the weeds from a technology perspective. We might get a little bit, but if there is any confusion or you need clarity, just like I said, open up and let me know. So what does it mean to have an operating system or an application in general to go end of life or end of support? This is happening with Windows 10 come October 14th, which is roughly a month away. And what that essentially means is that nothing's really going to change from your perspective. You're going to be able to work. There's not going to be the blue screen of death that comes up. Your office isn't going to be shut down. You're still going to be able to work, access your applications, access your computers, your devices, your workstations. What that does mean essentially, though, is that you're no longer going to be able to get support for the Windows 10 operating system. So if you are running that operating system, meaning your applications are running that within the Windows 10 environment, you have Windows 10 running on infrastructure, servers, hardware, PCs, and you had any type of issue or challenge or problem, you are out of support. You could call Microsoft, but they're not going to help you. You could call your IT folks. They may be able to potentially satisfy that need, but they are not going to be able to leverage Microsoft in any way, shape, or form. Uh, that also means no patches, no updates to continue the performance, the capabilities, and the functionalities of the application. They'll still be there, and the security side of the fence, they'll still be there, but over time, the application or the operating system, I should say, is going to degrade. Um, so that's essentially what's going to happen come the 14th. But as mentioned, you're going to be able to log into your systems, your devices, you're going to be able to work. Um, there are some opportunities to extend security updates, and we'll talk about that. But overall, the the risk, at least initially, will be minimal, but over time, that's going to increase. The biggest area of concern is around security, because we'll touch on that a little bit, and the perspective of what threat actors see within the legal community as a target. Any questions, any thoughts there that we need to dig into a little bit as far as what is actually going to happen on the 14th? Let's see any questions or thoughts there. So from the perspective of those firms or organizations that are going to be continuing to run on Windows 10 after the 14th, what is the risk involved? Um, a couple areas, and like I said, the biggest is security, but we aren't the only ones that are aware of this. Um, the threat actors out there are also aware of this. Um, uh, Law firms have traditionally been a high value target for threat actors in the cybersecurity world. Um, and I'll pause to see if anybody wants to fathom any thoughts or guesses on why law firms are a high value target.
Would it be because they can reach out to an assistant and there's so many different people they can reach out to and get into our system?
That is a component, Melissa. Thank you. There's a lot of areas of vulnerability, but the main ones come from really the data that you folks have in house. So it's not just your sensitive data, but your client sensitive data, depending on the practice too, and the client base that you folks have. But you are viewed as having highly sensitive information. The other components are um, law firms have traditionally been late adopters from a technology perspective, um, uh, resistant to change, don't like disruption, but that's a general consensus from human beings, right? But overall, threat actors see law firms as late adopters of technology, which could cause openings and risk and vulnerabilities. Um, Plus that, excuse me, you technically sometimes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of perspective when it relates to technology. So you have that going for the sensitive data, the late adoption, and then for a firm that after October 14th is still continuing to run on an application or an operating system that is end of life, your exposure and risk accentuates quite a bit. Again, we're not the only ones. The technology professionals out there aren't the only ones. This is open, so you are going to be a high value target for hackers if you are continuing to run on Windows 10. And we'll talk about some ways to prevent that. Uh, Another consideration or risk that you have moving forward with the migration process. or the transition process is um, there's a lot of considerations to take in. There's a lot of considerations to think about. Um, Windows 10 is an operating system. You have applications running on that. You have that running typically on hardware, unless you're in a completely hosted software as a service type of environment. What is that roadmap going to look like? What's that path going to look like if you're going to go to Windows 11, which is the recommended path, or some other potential alternative? How is this transition going to impact those other applications? Is Windows 10 going to be able to, or excuse me, Windows 11 going to be able to run on the hardware that you're essentially potentially going to migrate to? What is that going to be from an investment perspective? Are you going to have to essentially invest in new hardware? Are you going to have to essentially upgrade your current application set, document management, accounting, time entry, so on and so forth? So there could be extensive time downtime. There could be extensive disruption. There could be extensive cost that may impact this because of the latency and transition. There's some other risks to consider, as I mentioned, around insurance and compliance with your current clients, and we'll touch on that in a bit as we move this forward a little bit. Any any questions there? So in general, what can firms be doing here? And I did want to circle back to one thing, and we could possibly talk about that at the end. But for those firms that haven't decided or started the process to make the jump, it's really critical that we start these conversations now. Um, we have almost moved about 95% of our clients over. We should get them all over by the 14th, those that have decided. But from a timeline perspective, we started these conversations at the beginning of 2024 because we understood that this type of transition, this type of event, um, takes several months potentially, depending on the path forward, depending on your current state too, and we'll touch on that. But it's really important to start now. But it might relate to your risk tolerance, and how comfortable is the firm running on an operating system, which essentially impacts your entire firm, on an operating system that impacts your entire firm that isn't supported anymore. How is that going to work from a service perspective? What is the level of disruption that it's going to cause? What is the level of cost an impact on your team going to have? So these are some things to consider as far as your risk tolerance. And there's firms out there that are perfectly happy not having to or wanting to invest in making this jump just now because of their tolerance is high for the risk and exposure that it may cause from a security perspective, as well as a disruption and change perspective. But um, highly encouraged to start now. Do your research. There's a couple different alternatives that you could take, whether you're going to migrate or whether you're going to actually stay on Windows 10. It's like I said, on October 14th, you're not going to be shut out of your system. So there's some potential to delay the migration, but highly not recommended because of that security implication. And there's help out there, whether you have an internal IT staff, which or an external IT partner. If you're not having these conversations, you should be having these conversations, and those are the resources, those are the experts that we need to be talking to. You need to be talking to really develop what that roadmap and that plan is going to look like. Any questions there?
Mike, how quickly would, if a law firm is deciding now to want to do the upgrade, how quickly would SCS be able to get them converted over?
I mean, I knew that question was going to come up. Um, in all honesty, Melissa, the actual transition from actually moving the operating system from Windows 10 to Windows 11, it could happen over the course of a weekend. But It's the preparation time that goes into it on the front end, and then the testing and validating on the back end, which could be several months. It's take and there's components that are involved, like I touched on a little bit earlier with your current state, and we'll touch on this, your current state, how your infrastructure, how your environment is currently designed, when that transition happens, what could be the impact, and of course, what do you want that new environment to look like? So it's those are the components that really take a lot of the time is planning and designing and validating and testing. And that could take upwards to 3 to 6 months to do. Um, but there are some, and we'll touch on some things as far as you could escalate that. There are ways to do phased approaches. It sounds like you might be doing that, Melissa, yourself there at the firm, as far as with some of the PCs and the workstations. But there's also the back end side of the fence as far as the server infrastructure and the operating systems that they're running in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I know that eventually they did that even before they issued the laptops, but we were having so many issues like with our accounting system of how to run report. It was some things are still not even fully 100% how it was before the conversion, but just got to deal with it.
Well, you bring up actually a pretty decent point, Melissa. So you were having some major challenges with the accounting system that was running on Windows 10.
Yeah, and even for me at least is mainly running certain reports. It doesn't we have to take a couple of extra steps or some functions are just not working like how they were working before. And that is like a work on that's like another to-do list.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. So after you've done the migration to Windows 11, you're finding more challenges or more, we'll just say, functional issues and frustrations with your accounting system after the move.
Yeah, like there's just a couple of functions that are not operating correctly,
Yeah.
how they used to, or even if, for example, we're on Adiron and we're on Sierra, and there's certain reports that automatically run in the background and go to a folder, and now we have to go around it a certain way. It's complicated.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up because that's actually a key component. And once you decide to start this process, once you start communicating this to the stakeholders and the professionals that are going to help you, as well as communicating to the firm that this is going to be happening because this is a change. You're changing your operating systems, and a lot of your technology environment is tied to that operating system. So it could be a significant shift or a significant event, and there's going to be disruption. There's likely going to be downtime, uh, and there's going to be training that's going to be involved. So it's going to touch everybody. But going back to what you were kind of alluding to, Melissa, once that communication is done and once you start having the discussions with the stakeholders that this needs to happen, it's about stepping back to planning, the planning phase. And I had a conversation yesterday with a firm in Encino, and I hear this probably 60 to 70% of the time when we start having these conversations with firms, whether it's around Windows 10, any technology project. We don't know what we don't know. So let's create an opportunity to figure out what it is that our current technology environment is. What are we using? How are we using it? Why are we using it? What are the adoption rates? Do we truly have our arms around what our hardware environment looks like, what our networking environment looks like, what our application stack looks like, what are we using, whether it's an Aderant or an iManage or a NetDocs or practice specific applications. Let's get an understanding of what the lay of the land is today. Then we start talking about migrating from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and what is the impact of that migration going to have on the firm as it relates to hardware, network, and applications. Because you might have applications that you're running, and it sounds like there might be a potential issue is that those applications might not play well in a Windows 11 environment because those applications themselves may be potentially end of life, or close to it or configured in a way that hasn't been deeply looked at. And we'll get touch on that a little bit in a second. But from the hardware side, when you do this migration, is Windows 11 going to be able to run on the hardware that you have? If you are running hardware, you might have all your environment in the cloud too, and that's another consideration. But are the applications themselves going to be able to run within that environment too? So there's a number of different components to look at to grasp and see how truly is this going to impact the overall integration and um, the world that we live in. And it sounds like, Melissa, you're having some challenges really around the configuration piece and the integration piece because those things need to be digested and looked at. Um, the other component, obviously, is cybersecurity. Um, what is your current cybersecurity maturity level today running in the Windows 10 environment? And what is the potential impact once you make that migration? Ideally, you want to be able to improve that posture, but what could potentially happen to maybe degrade that posture? So those are all things we need to be understanding prior to making this jump. And then once we understand what that current state is, that we could plan this out in a methodical manner. And a bigger component of this is really helping us understand or eliminate or at least mitigate assumption, that uncertainty, those unknowns or gotchas that could potentially happen, but also it creates a level of predictability. And that predictability centers around the expectations being met from a timeline and a disruption, but also from an expense and an investment perspective. Um, you don't want to go through this process and then implement this on 50 different new PCs and realize that it's not going to work on these PCs because we haven't updated these PCs in 5 years and Windows 11 is not going to run on it. So, Melissa, did you have a question? I thought you came off mute for a second.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
I'm good.
Is there any questions around evaluating your current environment? Usually you could reach out to your current IT team, a third party that does consulting, and they do assessments. They do an audit of your environment and come back to you with reports to say, hey, listen, this is your current health and well-being of your environment, hardware, software, security. We good there? Okay. I wanted to bring this up because we're seeing quite a bit of this, the modernization or the law firm of the future, so to speak. And there are times when these events happen that create opportunities for firms to consider a potential bigger change. Um, we have a lot of firms that today have been running in an environment that's completely software as a service. They have no servers. All their applications are running on a serverless environment. So they've taken this opportunity as they have evaluated the Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration to move to um, Windows 365, or it's a Windows desktop in the cloud or a virtual desktop in the cloud. Um, and we'll touch on it a little bit, and there's some value to it. Uh, it's it has been known to create an ease of use or a better user experience. It's tighter from an integration perspective. It's the perception is that there's the ability for it to be more secure. Um, it could be attractive for if for you to keep employees or potentially recruit employees because you are in the 22nd century, I guess, 21st, 22nd century, whatever we are now. Um, it could be an industry differentiator. We've seen probably about 4 or 5 of our clients move to this type of environment. Um, there is an argument or a debate from a cost perspective or an investment perspective. When I'm asked that question, it really comes down to, from what I've seen, it's just a shift from a capital expense to an operating expense. There is a cap expense to get you moved over to this type of environment. Sometimes that capex could be amortized over a 3 or 5 year period. But what I'm sharing this for is just an opportunity if firms are looking at a potential way of doing things better, or we have conversations where we don't want to be managing servers or hardware anymore. We want to get that out of our building. This could be that opportunity to think about that. Um, and self-serving, this type of environment is easier for IT professionals to support and manage and to take care of. So those savings could be potentially um, passed on to the clients or to the firm. So um, any questions there? I'm sure you folks have probably touched on this a little bit with your teams.
Mike, for everyone who doesn't know, my name is Jordan and I work with Mike over at STS. And Mike, you make a good point. I just wanted to add as well, when we're looking at cloud tech, a lot of the time we have a lot more security capabilities, or maybe not more, but enhanced security capabilities. And there is data that shows that law firm clients, I think it's roughly 40% of them is the statistic, they are willing to pay a premium for law firm services from firms who have that enhanced security. So when we're looking at that IT modernization, there are some kind of marketplace positioning perks that can really be profitable at times.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. And I think you teed me up for a slide or two from now. Um, we wanted to bring this up because this is another consideration for firms that obviously are not going to be able to meet that October 14th deadline. Uh, but what Microsoft is offering, and there's limitations to these, what they're called extended security updates. There's investment for these extended security, these ESUs, so to speak. But what they're doing is for firms that aren't in a position to be able to make this jump or make this migration over the course, really for the next 3 years, but they're offering critical security patches to mitigate some of the risk around the exposure and vulnerabilities that firms are going to have while continuing to run on Windows 10. And Melissa, we could get this presentation out to everybody, correct?
Yeah, I'm recording it, and then your slides, if you share them with us, we'll also send it out.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. And you could there's a link in here that you could dig into that as far as what those limitations are. So um, just from a liability perspective, Microsoft, if you're running devices and hardware that are a little bit long in the tooth, we'll say, and don't meet these limitations, they don't want to provide you with an extended security update to implement onto those devices. And then a breach happened or a security incident happens, and they're left with the liability because this update was implemented on a device that really wasn't up to standard. So they have some limitations. That's another way for them to protect themselves, so to speak. But those limitations or those standards are listed as far as what the requirements are. Excuse me. Um, One thing to note here too is if you are eligible for these updates and you end up investing in getting these updates, Microsoft is not going to help you implement these updates. Uh, Whether it's your internal team or your external IT team, they are going to essentially have to figure it out themselves. Because again, you're running on an end of life application or operating system, excuse me. Therefore, you won't be able to get any assistance in doing so. This is, I think, a little bit of what Jordan was referring to, and something I touched on earlier in the one slide is insurance and client requirements. Um, Depending on if you are still going to be running Windows 10, and that transition might not happen for the next, we'll just say 12 months. Uh, where are you at with your cybersecurity insurance renewal? Um, that needs to be considered because of whether you're getting that renewal is coming up or depending on what your practice is, if you're getting assessments or audits from your clients to fill out, we get these all the time from our clients as far really around financial services or healthcare or life insurance or insurance companies, they want to do a health check essentially as far as is 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 your firm meeting some standards or requirements from a security perspective, and can you prove it? So if you're getting these questionnaires, so to speak, to fill out, or you're renewing your cyber insurance policy, and they see that you're currently running on Windows 10, that's going to probably set off a red flag for them. Might not necessarily get denied for a policy, but they might want to increase that premium significantly. There is a potential for a client maybe not wanting to engage you, whether it's a current client, maybe wants to leave you because of this, or a new client that you're trying to engage with or bring on that might not want to do business with you because of this risk that is exposed because you're running on this end of life application. So, something to think about as you're starting to make this transition or considering to make this transition. These are essentially the alternatives or what your options are. I mean, again, you could not recommend it, but you could stay on the Windows 10 operating system. And we've talked about the risks involved with that. We've talked about some of the options with the extended security updates. But realistically, these are the two paths forward. We touched on Windows 11, and that's your operating system. That's migrating Windows 10 operating system to Windows 11 and bringing your entire environment over. This is the system that's going to be running on your servers, your infrastructure, your applications are running within this operating system. Um, Not really a practical huge change. You could essentially move over, and things are going to operate pretty much consistently. There might be a little bit of a training and a gap there that needs to be addressed. But essentially, things are very, very similar because it's one operating system to another. But again, you need to take into the considerations about, can it run on the hardware that we currently have, or do we need to upgrade that? And are the applications going to be able to operate within the Windows 11 environment? So the Windows 365, that is that virtual desktop that I had mentioned, that modernized workstation, if you will. Um, this is really catered to the firms that are running a software as a service environment. They have no real servers, they have no real infrastructure, just obviously their hardware and maybe some switches, routers, and firewalls within their office or offices. Um, there is some potential with Windows 365 if you are running an application on a server to move that application into Microsoft's Azure environment and be able to still deliver that application to you via the Windows 365 virtual desktop. Again, the virtual desktop is just for those firms thinking they want to get out of that environment where they have servers on site and evaluate that new way of potentially managing and running their business from a technology perspective. That's pretty much it. We could take questions, but really, what we're trying to provide you is the understanding of what this impact could have on a firm. It's best not to best not to delay any further and get things started. Having those internal conversations, if you already haven't made that jump, start kind of laying out the discussions, transparent discussions about these are the risks we have internally if we continue to operate on Windows 10. We might be able to mitigate some of those risks for a period of time. However, it's probably a pretty good idea to start evaluating how this is going to flow, what the risks are, what our tolerance is, and if we do make that jump, what is that jump going to look like? What's the impact on the firm in running in this new environment, whether it's a Windows 10 environment or a Windows 365 environment? Um, this is happening all over the place, so there's experts out there to help you. This isn't, we're not splitting atoms here. This isn't rocket science. This is certainly something that's being done and being done heavily right now, considering the deadline's coming up here in 3.5 weeks. So I'll take a pause. Hopefully some of you got some nuggets out of that, and I'll open it up for questions here.
Tim?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Um, with a real small firm right now, and um, small firms, of course, already have a cash issue, usually of some sort. Just out of curiosity, if I was just to drop Windows 11 on a small, 2 or 3 lawyer firm, it's insurance defense, works with insurance companies, pretty straightforward cases. They start, they end, and they don't come back. So it's nothing. You're not dealing with stuff that goes on for years and years, and boxes and boxes of documents and trials and all that kind of stuff. Because insurance companies don't want to go to trial anymore.
Hmm.
What would happen if I were just to drop Windows 11 on them and just say, today we're Windows 10, tomorrow we're Windows 11?
Well, it's certainly an option. Um, uh, you can do that, but I would still encourage you to go back and kind of evaluate how does that impact you? When you make that trend, first of all, one, if you're what is that server infrastructure? You're putting it on another server, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah. We have one server. We're paperless. Um, we try to, our phone systems on the cloud. The internet. So we're pretty nimble. In fact, I've been able to operate pretty much anywhere around the world and do business fairly easily. So we're pretty nimble. But again, because our practice is pretty straightforward, we're not
Right.
dealing with really major litigation with 48 lawyers working on a case and paralegals and guns, pistols, and whips. It's just 1 or 2 people.
I would, first, would Windows 11 be able to operate on that server, depending on the health and longevity of that server? If you just invested in it and just brought it on board, it could be able to meet the requirements necessary. And then when you make that transition, the application set that you're running, is that going to be able to run within the Windows 11 environment? Are there any integration pieces or customized configurations that may, for lack of a better term, Jim, break in that transition process? Um, is there any areas of liability or risk exposure that's going to happen within that transition? Are there any gaps that are going to open up because you're making it? Um, it could be just as easy as dropping it in, but um, what is the level of tolerance for the headaches or potential frustrations and bugs you have to work out on the back end?
Like
Um,
what? You've been talking in generalities. Let's get specific. Like what?
so, what accounting system are you using?
Time slips, and if they've got us in a situation where it's all upgraded from the cloud, you can't have a separate subscription anymore. So but it's on the PCs. It's a PC system, but all the upgrades, all the support is now going to be through the cloud. It's just how they've restructured is just their demand. Now other
Okay.
stuff like QuickBooks is local, and it's old. We have to do something with that. But we're pretty simple. WordPerfect. Everything else is just internet searches and Westlaw and that kind of stuff. So the lawyer is pretty nimble that way.
And QuickBooks and time slips, right? Time slips, you said?
Yes,
Are they talking to each other? Are they integrated in any way, shape, or form?
yes.
Okay. Would QuickBooks and time slips, and I don't know the answer to this, the versions you have be able to run on Windows 11?
That's the obvious question. Yeah, right.
Right? So those that's one headache that could perk up, right? If considering they're talking to one another, right? So there's a level of integration there between time slips and QuickBooks. When you when you make that jump, and if they are able to run on the Windows 11 operating system, is that configuration going to come over too? Because if that configuration breaks and you guys start trying to work billing and billing isn't caught up because there was some break in the connection, and you're missing out on revenue that you should be billing because when you made the transition, those two systems aren't talking to each other anymore for some particular reason. So that's kind of a specific example that I would make sure that I evaluate on the planning stage to make sure that you're uncovering every gap possible. So when you do make that migration and you click the button on and Monday morning everything's live on Windows 11, there is that seamless cutover and there isn't those breaks or gaps in the integrations. Does that help clarify some things?
That it gives a little bit more specifics. With the law firms you're working with, when they're going online for research for whatever they're doing, what problems have they run into?
Yeah, the research side though, I mean, because assuming that the research tools that you're using are all web-based.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so those areas are we don't see much issue when these transitions are happening to Windows 11 for applications that are running in the cloud. Now, the only thing that could potentially come up is depending on what browser you're using, and is that browser going to be compatible with Windows 11? That might be the only thing to really consider. Um, but if you're accessing this environment, or you're accessing, excuse me, the tool via a web-based product, there shouldn't have any issue with continuing to do that within the new operating system.
Yeah, we pretty much use Chrome because the Microsoft, they, it turns out a lot of the applications we use has a lot of problems. We get involved with a lot of electronic billing with our clients,
Yep.
and the Microsoft interface has failed with a lot of them. In fact, they insist we use Chrome because the Microsoft can't access them. So in fact, most of our billing now is internet, and no payments are internet too. So it's nothing, um, which has got its pluses and its minuses, but we have to use Google Chrome just
Hmm.
because that's the only way it'll work.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and then as long as that version of Chrome is compatible with Windows 11, you shouldn't have too much of the disruption or headaches on that side of the fence.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. Uh, Jordan, I'm interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that conversation. So Jim, I looked up the time slips compatibility actually just to give you kind of a more granular example there. So I think in these situations, a lot of times there's a two-pronged problem, which is that if a firm has not already updated to the newer operating system or has that kind of IT proactivity, um, they tend to have not updated the auxiliary softwares and programs either because the culture of the firm is not super proactive. So if you have an older version of a software or program that you're using, like we're talking, could be anything from 2011. So Timeslips 2011, for example, which some firms are still using per the help support that I researched, that's not going to be compatible with Windows 11. So if that's kind of the culture at law firms that, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and you haven't updated those solutions in a while, that's typically where you're going to run into compatibility issues. So newer solutions or newer versions or recently updated solutions are typically made to be compatible. Of course, not in every case, but typically made to be compatible with the newest operating systems. Vice versa is if you're still running old programs, that's where things are going to get broken. So I hope that kind of helps explain the problem.
It does because we're going to run smack dab into firm culture also, since we're using a really old version of Outlook because senior partner is using that as basically his research arm in a way, and so he's got emails going back for way too long, and getting him off it, we'll have to put a gun to his head, and even then I don't think it'll work. So I'm not quite sure. He's going to have a choice soon, but I think firm culture is going to be a big piece of what we're all dealing with.
Well, I mean, just I'll comment on that, Jim. Firm culture is a big component with most. I'm not even going to boil it down to technology with most decisions that firms Well, really any business, right? It comes down to organization culture as far as what business decisions are made. But when it comes to investing in technology specifically for law firms, for those partners they don't want change. They want to operate in the same manner, the same way. When I go to search my Outlook, even if it is Outlook from, Windows XP years and years and years ago, I want to be able to search it the same way and get the same results. And that's just not it, there is some possibilities that can make that happen, but this particular partner in that example is when you go to Windows 11, you're going to be on the latest and greatest Outlook or email. The search capabilities will still be similar, but he won't be able to find that data.
No, you can do. That's why we haven't changed it, but we're pretty ahead of the game in most areas. But that's the one area I got a problem. But thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for the question. Any more, Melissa? I see that you're off of mute. Did you have a question?
No, no. Actually, no, I do have one question. What if, like, on your regular PC, like not work related, we can just upgrade to Windows 11, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, technically, yeah. It, I would take into consideration what are the applications that you're running on that PC. I mean,
Okay.
in most situations, like my personal PC, there's not, other than outside of the Microsoft application, Microsoft Office, I don't have any application. I don't have any applications running on my PC because everything we do is going to the cloud, whether it's our financial services, our bank, health, kids' schools. Now everything is online, so the probability for disruption, the probability for downtime is incredibly minimal, as well as the level of risk for updating your personal PC is very, very, very minimal. And in all honesty, if you have concerns about doing it yourself, you could take it to a Best Buy or a Geek Squad or something of that nature, and they'll be able to take care of you for it. But shouldn't have a high level of risk with doing it yourself.
Okay.
I think that's it. I appreciate it. Hopefully, y'all collected a little bit of information and it was of some use for you. Melissa, yeah, Melissa, I'll send you this PowerPoint so you could distribute it, and if you could just copy Jordan and I on that, so we have the recording too, that'd be wonderful. Or send it to us separately, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jordan. We appreciate this very important presentation, and I hope that everybody got a lot of information out of it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Mike. His email is on the slides, and we'll also include that information on the email when we send the slides and the recording.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you all. Have a great rest
Thank
of
you
the
so
day.
much. Have a great
Appreciate it.
day.
Bye bye now.
Thank you.